G'day everyone. I've been thinking a lot lately about where we are as a society and how we got here. There's a lot going on in the world, so I wrote a little bit of a paper, if you like, on some of my thoughts on the political spectrum. Um, it's about 10 minutes long, I think, so I'll read it to you. I've been working on a bit of a theory to explain the history of Marxism and socialism and how it has infiltrated every aspect of today's society. Back in the day, when you were an artisan like a blacksmith, you could dictate your own work life. You could dictate when you show up to work, or maybe you have a creative control over whatever process you're using to make whatever it is you're making, and you probably have ownership of whatever you made. So by the end of the day, you get to keep what you made either for yourself or your inventory to sell. But industrial workers had their labor directed by management, telling them when to show up and what to do when they are there, like machines. And they don't get to keep the product of their labor. These industrial workers worked on a part of a product that belonged to the business owners. So that meant business owners, the rich, accumulated property while the workers was propertyless. The workers get paid wages, as little as possible, as the business owners wouldn't hire workers if they could not make a profit. On top of getting paid very little, working conditions was pretty rough. And because there was no government interference, which meant there was no regulations, so you could work long hours in dangerous conditions. This created two classes: the working class, who make up the majority of the population within society and must work to survive, and the capitalist class, a small minority who derives profit from employing the working class through private ownership of the means of production. People like a guy called Karl Marx seen this as the rich oppressing the poor. He created a particular way of dividing society up in two parts: the oppressed and the oppressors. And you are either one group or the other. And what determines what group you fall into is based on your identity. Karl Marx came up with the ideas that laid the groundwork for the theory and practice of communism, which advocates for a classless system. The only way to overcome this oppression is to change society itself. In other words, have a revolution and make a new society free from oppression. Marxism is an inherently unstable ideology that easily gets out of control. Marxist says freedom ends where oppression begins. But if you ask us, where is this oppression? They say everywhere. Who gets to say what oppression is and what isn't oppression? They would say we do. And if you say, can we talk about it? They say no. If you disagree with them, Marxist organizations tend to categorize you as part of the problem. And when they come into power, they tend to shortly after declare speech and action against the movement to be oppression, and they abolish opposition. Karl Marx believed the power relationships between capitalists and the workers were inherently exploitive and would inevitably create class conflict. He believes this conflict would ultimately lead to a revolution in which the working class would overthrow the capitalist class and seize control of the economy. But that never happened, as groups of socialists called for more equal distribution of wealth, solidarity amongst workers, and better working conditions. The unions and labour movements of the early days. Now, almost all unions in Australia are affiliated with the ACTU, Australian Council of Trade Unions. The Australian Labor Party was formed by trade unions in the 1890s. It is one of a small number in the world where unions affiliate directly with the party. This gives the union significant representation in the party, internal structures, and influence in choice of parliamentary candidates. Internationally, the Australian Labor Party is a member of the Progressive Alliance, a network of social democratic parties, having previously been a member of the Socialist International. The view was formed in the early 1900s. Elites controlled culture, and the control they have over culture gives them a dominating influence over the public and makes the public kind of complacent with whatever the agenda the elites have for them. They would use the culture to brainwash the people in not questioning society. Because of this, Marxists wanted to gain influence on culture, and once they get it, they can use it to educate the public. Fast forward to the 1960s, we discover identity politics and movements. The New Left was a broad political movement mainly consisting of activists in the Western world who campaigned for a broad range of social issues such as civil and political rights, environmentalism, feminism, gay rights, and gender roles. Some who use the term New Left see the movement as a continuation and revitalisation of traditional leftist goals to earlier Marxist and labour union movements. Now you're starting to get a picture if you replace Marxist with the Greens Party and labour unions with the Labour Party. Communists and socialists, they are very similar. Today, they control the culture. Wokeness was born. Now everything is censored, filtered, and fact-checked by biased organisations. We lost national pride because we should be global citizens. Don't be proud of your flag because it represents colonialism. You are not allowed to vote or buy alcohol until you're 18, but you can change your gender if you're 7. Disney movies promote wokeness to children. Local councils refuse to celebrate Australia Day because it might be offensive. We get quotas in workplaces to promote diversity, but if a male gets promoted, then it's discrimination. I'm a straight, white, middle-aged male born into a Christian family that works in a coal mine. Does that make me a sexist, racist, misogynist, oppressive climate denier? Climate change, critical race theory, sexism, gender politics, religious freedoms, all these arguments are divisive and creates that scenario of the oppressed and the oppressors, which inevitably leads to communism. Slowly and gradually, the far left have changed Western culture. So much so that if we have an opinion for whatever reason that does not agree with the narrative of the day, you get demonized and labeled, making you part of the problem. As a result, most people won't speak up fearing they might get labeled, and the people who does comply gets to sit on their moral high horse of being a good citizen because that's a decent thing to do. We need to ask ourselves, as a society, where do we draw the line? Cultural Marxism. Now, that's just my opinion of what is happening in our world. I hope it was informative.